recording. And just a few housekeeping matters before we move into today's class. First of all, I posted the pre-recorded lecture for Chapter 1 in the PowerPoints already. I've also done an announcement with respect to your last test and your last in-class assignment. Because the last in-class assignment would have fallen on the 2nd of April, which is Good Friday, I've kind of left it open for a number of days for you to finish, anywhere between midday on the 1st of April to the following Monday. So you can choose to do it at your leisure as long as you complete it by the deadline on April the 5th. So that should be easy enough. Now, for today, what we're going to do is we're going to start exam prep. I think that's the best way we can spend our time right now, getting you ready to write the exam. And hopefully most of you, if not all of you, have already booked your exam with Examity. You know when you're writing, you've got your time booked and you're ready to go. And if you haven't done that yet, do it. Do it right away. Don't slots do get filled up, and you may not be able to write at your convenience, and that may be problematic for you. But you know, the sooner you get in there, the sooner you can, or the easier it will be for you to get the time of your choice. All right. So the way we're going to do exam review is we're going to look at old exams, actual exams, and you have an opportunity to answer the questions. And we're going to go through some exam tips and we'll give you a flavor for what it's really like. All right. So without further ado, and also, I should mention, after we're done the review today, we're going to go over the third assignment and I'll go over how the marks were given out there. So, as I said, without further ado, let's look at the exams. So this is, we're going to start off and do it in the way that the exam is structured. So the first section is law. You have to complete that in order to go on to the next section, which is ethics. Got to complete that in order to go on to the next one, which is professional practice. So let's take a look at some old exam questions, and you can tell me what the answers are. So number one, which one of the following is most closely related to natural justice? We've got an A, anybody else have an answer? We have a B, a couple of B's. Okay, I won't belabor this too long. The correct answer is C. Administrative law deals with justice. Did someone get a fair hearing? Were there procedural safeguards followed? It's in the text. It's a difficult question, but the correct answer to number one is C, admin law. Number two, which one of the following does not relate to Canada's common law? Give me a second while I grab a bottle of water. See that we got some right answers. It's C. The Napoleonic Code is the basis for civil law, not common law. It is the basis for a lot of law in Quebec and other similar French-speaking nations or provinces. Number three, if two parties want to have a dispute resolved by a third party, which would be binding on both, but they don't want to go to court, which one of the following dispute resolution methods could they choose? Wei Hong says A. Yeah, Stephen, it'd be nice if we could take one or the other on the exam. The correct answer to number 3 is A. Arbitration is the alternative dispute resolution method where the decision is binding. Mediation is non-binding. Number 4, which one of the following statements is not correct? Right. The correct answer to number 4 is B. Tort law is not intended to punish. Only criminal law is meant for punishment. Civil law of all kinds, in other words, non-criminal law, tort law, contract law, is meant to compensate the innocent party, not punish the wrongdoer. Number 5, which one of the following is an unintentional tort? And the correct answer to number 5 is A, negligence. Negligence, by its very definition, is unintentional. It's what happens when you don't think something through and you don't meet the standard of care when you have a duty of care. So the correct answer to 5 is A. Negligence, product liability, negligent misrep, and professional liability are called what as a group? Wei Hong and Steven say it's unintentional torts. That's correct. The answer to number 6 is B. Moving on. Paul's graph, where a package of fireworks was dropped when a railroad employee helped a passenger onto a train, and the resulting explosion injured Paul's graph. Why did the courts decide in favor of Long Island Railroad? Right, the correct answer is A. You couldn't reasonably foreseen the consequences of their actions because they didn't know the package contained fireworks. Number 8, some activities are hazardous by their nature. The standard of care required increases with the degree and impact of the hazard and the potential consequences of the hazard. Which one of the following activities would be, for which of the following activities would the standard of care be the highest? We're now on number 8. Right, it is D, transporting nuclear waste by truck through a major urban area. Of those 4, that is the most dangerous because it could cause the most harm to the most number of people. Number 9, res ipsa loquitur means what? Steven says it's B. Steven number 2 says it's D, and Benjamin says B. The correct answer is B. Res ipsa loquitur in Latin means the thing speaks for itself, which corresponds nicely with the answer in B. Number 10, contributory negligence is best described by which of those options? We have an A. Do we have any other answers? The correct answer is A. It's the when 2 or more persons jointly contribute to the damage. The degree of fault is apportioned between them. It's not C because the share of responsibility by someone other than the plaintiff or the defendant, that person is outside the lawsuit, right? So they can't be found they can be found, but they can't be found liable. Number 11, Donahue versus Stevenson was a landmark case in both product liability and negligence. Which of the following statements is not correct about that case? Which one is not correct? Steven says A. Does anyone else have an answer? Well, they ask questions about cases. They don't have very many questions about cases anymore, but they ask about concepts and doctrines. So the answer, and this is an important point, the answer is D, right? It says all tort actions and product liability are an open and shut case. Whenever you see all, always, never, that should be a hint that something is amiss with that response. So when you have an answer which is not correct and you see all or always or never, those categorical words, that should get your spidey sense tingling. This isn't necessarily right, because in our business, nothing is always the case or never the case. All right. So just keep that in mind when we go on further, and also when you do the exam itself. Prior to Donahue and Stevenson, a party who did not purchase a product but was injured by the product being defective had no claim against the manufacturer because, which one? Yes, the answer is A. There was no contractual relationship between the manufacturer of the product and the end user who was harmed. Number 13, which one of the following statements with respect to negligent misrepresentation is not correct? Stephen Lung says it's D. Do we have anybody else who agrees or disagrees? We have one person who disagrees. Stephen, why do you say it's D? Your memory. Okay, well, that's fair enough. Yeah, so whether it's void or not depends on the plaintiff. That's the correct answer, because a contract entered into because of misrepresentation is voidable, not necessarily null and void. The plaintiff has the option, or the innocent party, let's say, has the option to consider it void, get rescission, and be put back to the position they were in before, or continue on with the contract after they find out about the misrepresentation if they decide it's a good enough deal anyway. So a contract entered into because of a misrepresentation is voidable, which is quite different from it being void. That's why D is the correct answer to 13. Where the client is bound by contractual obligations, but also has other responsibilities. Which of the following legal responsibilities is the least important for a professional to be aware of? Stephen says it's D. Anyone have any other answers? Agree or disagree? Now we have a lot of abstainers. The correct answer to 14 is C. The possibility of being, the word being is omitted by accident, vicariously liable. Vicarious liability, as some of you may remember, is being responsible for the wrongdoing of another. And that of those four is the least important. Certainly the reliance placed on them being a guide to their client, which shouldn't be abused. That fiduciary duty is an important legal responsibility. So the correct answer is C. The other thing to take away from this is that quite often there are typos in the exam, and you just have to live with it because either the proofreading was wrong or something happened when the test was uploaded. You just have to do your best. The examinee proctor won't be able to help you. Number 15, professionals have a responsibility with respect to confidentiality of information. They must do which of the four choices? And Stephen says the answer is A to number 15. And Stephen's right. You never disclose confidential information obtained from a client's project or from your former employer. Number 16, the validity of a contract will be affected if a party makes a false statement of fact that induces another party into the contract. For a claim of misrepresentation to succeed, the misled party must show what? The Stevens say it's B, and Christian agrees. That's correct. You don't need lying for misrepresentation. It can be negligent or innocent. And the misrepresentation concerned an important part of the contract. That's true, but that doesn't necessarily make you enter into the contract. And the fact that you were not aware also doesn't make you enter into the contract. So the correct answer to 16 is B. Next page. The parole evidence rule states what? A question mark? Other than Stephen, does anyone want to hazard a guess? The correct answer is A. The parole evidence rule basically states that the courts only consider what you put in the contract. Contract only means what it says. I mean, that's the main rule. So the correct answer of those four choices is A. Anything excluded at the signing stage is also excluded when you interpret it in subsequent consideration. 18, a contract may be discharged by which? Stephen, quick off the mark, and Stephen number 2 agrees. The correct answer to 18 is B. Number 19, liquidated damages are what? Liquidated damages are pre-agreement as to what damages will be if a contract is breached. So with that definition, 19, the answer to 19 is B, an agreement by the parties to a contract in advance as to what the reasonable damages for a breach of contract will be. Number 20, in very simple terms, the tendering process is what? What is the answer to number 20? And the answer is B. It's a means of collecting offers to supply as per particular specifications. All right, so we're going to skip over the next page because we don't do cases like this anymore. And we'll look at the ethics part of that old exam. Question number 1, under what circumstance is it acceptable for a technology professional to disclose confidential information? Right, when a situation arises that, in the opinion of the professional, may endanger the safety and welfare of the public. The answer to number 1 is C. Which of the following should not be considered when making an ethical decision in the workplace? That's right, D, all of the above. All 3 are not relevant. Moral statements are which? The answer to number 3 is A. Moral statements are statements about whether something is right or wrong. Number 4, James, a chemical engineering technologist, has changed jobs. In his new job, his first project will have a sewer discharge, which may be a health hazard. James realizes some of his experience from his previous employer would allow him to suggest a design change in the process, which would eliminate this discharge. Carrying this design through would be a different use of the proprietary information from James's former employer, would not impact negatively on the former employer's business. What kind of issue is James faced with? What kind of ethical issue is James faced with? A couple of people say it's D, it's a liability issue. Is it? Well, I think the answer is, should you be using the confidential information from your previous job in your new job? And whether that is indeed a violation of the use of confidential information. So we're faced with a conceptual issue. Is this really unlawful, unwarranted use of confidential information for a new employer? So the answer to 4 is C. It is a conceptual issue, whether this is classified as misuse of confidential information. Number 5, a professional employee who decides to terminate his or her employment with an employer should not do which? You should not advise the employer of the reasons for accepting a position outside the employer's current organization. Which of the 4 should he not do? It's kind of weirdly worded, badly worded, unfortunately worded. It's the only reason this question is hard. Yeah, that's right. If you look at it, which should he not do? Then you shouldn't terminate your employment without notice and without helping the employer in continuity of function. That's not ethically acceptable or a way to behave in the workplace. So next question is number 7. You can see there's a 5 and there's a 7. There's usually something in between the two. But once again, typo. What does maintaining competence mean? Right, all of the above. Theory, exercising, developing appropriate judgment, and staying current on the developments in your field. All are part of being competent. Number 8, as a certified member of OSET, when are you least likely to encounter intellectual property and copyright issues in the workplace? Yes, the answer is D. When working with standard engineering equations, there's no intellectual property, there's no copyright associated with those. Number 9, a technology professional who becomes aware of an unacceptable hazard to the public or the environment shall do what? Right, of those, B is clearly the correct answer. Answer to number 9 is B. Number 10, which one of the following statements about risk management is unacceptable? And why is B the correct answer, Wei Hong? It is the correct answer, but why? Right, non-human environment is the tip off there. Okay, let's see what we got next. Yeah, we'll skip over that. Professional practice. Which one of the following statements best defines a partnership? Right, the answer is B. Well, it is part of law, but it's also part of professional practice. Number 2, which of the following is a characteristics of a sole proprietorship? Correct answer is B to number 2. Number 3, which of the following is a disadvantage of corporations over other business organizations? Number 3, which of the following is a disadvantage of corporations? Yes, so D is the correct answer. It's got higher initial costs of setup and organizing. The answer to number 3 is D. Number 4, preferred shares of a corporation always have 2 special rights attached to them. They are which? Yep, Chapter 6 can be on practice, Stephen. Correct answer to number 4 is A, dividend rights and wind-up rights. Number 5, which of the following is not a typical goal of a professional organization? Wei Hong says it's A, to limit the number of licensed practitioners, and that's correct. At least not formally. Some organizations do prefer to keep the number of practitioners lower rather than higher, but it's not something that they formally state. Number 6, professional liability insurance available to OSET members covers expenses arising from a member's errors or omissions while acting in the course of his or her profession. Which one of the following is not covered? And the correct answer is C. Fraud is intentional. Liability insurance for errors and omissions doesn't cover things that you do intentionally. It's meant to cover your mistakes. So the answer to which is not covered is C, damages for fraud. You're not usually covered for your own fraud. Number 7, the OSET certified member ID stamp may not be used on which one of the following? C or D, Stephen says. Who's got an answer? So we're at number 7. On which of the following may an OSET certified member ID stamp not be used? And if you look at the potential answers carefully, you'll see that B, documents requiring an engineer stamp when such a stamp will not be affixed. Now, if you need an engineer stamp and it's not going to be there, why would you think that an OSET member stamp would suffice, be required, or be appropriate? So the answer to number 7 is B. right? If you need an engineer stamp, you can't substitute an OSET certified member stamp. Number 8, the OSET Act 84 and the revised Act 98 are referred to as following. An engineer stamp has to be from the PEO, yes. And it will not be affixed. So the OSET stamp can't be a substitute. What are these acts in number 8 referred to? Stephen Lung says it is scope of practice legislation. Who agrees or disagrees? Stephen number 2 says it's professional legislation. Any other answers? The correct answer is A. It's right to title legislation. Because the OSET Act doesn't prohibit people working in engineering technology. It just prohibits people from using the designations that OSET has exclusive right to. And if you read the text, the chapters that we're kind of going through now, you'll see that the OSET Act and the revised act as well are called right to title legislation. Number 9, which Ontario law governs an employee's hours of work? That should be fresh in everyone's mind. It's D for number 9. And number 10, an individual or corporation charged with violation of the Occupational Health and Safety Act may avoid liability by which? And Wei Hong is correct. The answer to number 10 is C, by having and enforcing a mandatory due diligence program. All right, so let's move on to our next. Let's see what we got here. Let's try this from a different year's exam. Number 1, federal judges are which? How do they become federal judges? Wei Hong says they're appointed by the government of Canada. Benjamin agrees that is correct. The answer to number 1 is C, appointed by the government of Canada. Number 2, which one of the following falls outside of the jurisdiction of the federal court? Stephen Lung says copyright law falls outside the jurisdiction of the federal court. Agree or disagree? The answer is matrimonial law, B, falls outside the jurisdiction of the federal court. Immigration, copyright, and maritime all fall within. Number 3, which of the following remedies is not available to a plaintiff in a civil law case? And the answer is C. Incarceration, imprisonment, in other words, of the defendant falls outside the remedies available to a plaintiff in a civil law case. Number 4, which one of the following statements is not correct? Stephen Chu says the answer here is C. Who agrees? Wei Hong agrees, and that is the correct answer. The primary purpose of criminal law is not to compensate victims of crime, it's to punish wrongdoers. Number 5, the tort of slander and libel are grouped as defamation. Which one of the following would not be accepted as a defense for defamation? And the answer is C. Repeating statements made by others is not a defense. Number 6, an unintentional tort, as the title indicates, is one that happens because the defendant never truly thought about the issue or considered what the consequences of the action would be. Which one of the following statements should not be considered by a professional? We have a C as a potential answer. We have an A as a potential answer. Which one should not be considered? Of those 4, which do you think should not be considered by an ethical professional? And the answer is, to number 6, the answer is D. You don't consider whether your clients are smart enough, informed enough, sophisticated enough to know what is the cause of a problem or foul up. The others should definitely be considered. Next page. And then we did Paul's graph already. As you can see, these questions do kind of migrate from one year to the next. So hopefully a whole bunch of these will be on your exam, although there's now a pretty big pool, so you're going to be taking different exams, right? It's not the same one. It's not the way it was when it was on paper. They're randomly assigned to you as you take them. Number 8, what is first required in order to determine whether a breach of a duty of care has occurred? Right, the answer to number 8 is B. Number 9, once again, we've already done. What about number 10? When a defendant can prove volenti non fit injuria, the plaintiff would be awarded damages described best by which of the following statements? Stephen says it's B. Who agrees? Who disagrees? Correct answer is D. No damages under most circumstances unless the court portions some responsibility to the defendant. 11 and 12 were already covered in the previous version of the exam, so there's no point doing those again. And so let's Which of the following is only a moral responsibility as opposed to a legally recognized fiduciary duty owed by a professional? Wei Hong says it's C. Stephen agrees. Any other answers? Key is to read the question carefully. It says, which of the following is only a moral responsibility versus a legally recognized fiduciary duty? Good. Your change is correct. B is the correct answer. Living up to the respect accorded to a professional by society is important, but it's not a legal responsibility. The other three are. So the correct answer to 13 is B. We will skip over 14 because that case is no longer as part of the course. Number 15, in dealing with risk allocation with respect to design professionals, which one of the following is incorrect? Stephen and Wei Hong say it's D, and that's right. And how do you know that's probably the right answer? Always. Which one is incorrect? The one with always. There you go. Number 16, which one of the following statements about an offer is incorrect? Unfortunately, we don't have one of those tip-off words here. Right, the incorrect one is D. An offer is not binding on the offeree being the person who receives the offer. It's only binding when it is accepted in full. Number 17, which one of the following mistakes could not be relied upon to set aside or otherwise impeach a contract? And the answer is D, according to Stephen Wei Hong, and that's right. So why is the correct answer D? For the benefit of those who didn't know. Exactly. You can't use the law as an excuse. Not knowing the law is not an excuse. Ignorance of the law, as the old saying goes, is not an excuse. And so you can't rely on that to get out of a deal. Correct. The parole evidence rule prevents the court from accepting certain evidence. Which of the following would be an example of such evidence? Wei Hong says the answer is D. Agreement or disagreement? No, Wei Hong, you're right. The answer to number 18 is D. Evidence of a term agreed to in discussions to the contract is not admissible if it's not in the contract. Number 19, substantial performance of a contract means the contract must what? Stephen says B, must be significantly completed and payment demanded for the work completed, and that is correct. The answer to 19 is B. 20 we've already done. So we can wrap this portion up and move on to the next one I want to look at. Number 1, a technology professional shall provide an opinion on a professional subject only when. Stephen Chu says the answer here to number 1 is C. I also agree. The correct answer is C. Let's skip over number 2. That's not part of the course anymore. Number 3, which of the following actions does not demonstrate a moral standard or principle? Yeah, we have Nat says it's C. Why is the answer C, Nat? Unconditional, that's right. In order for a moral or standard or principle to be applicable, there has to be certain conditions, there has to be criteria. And if you defend someone unconditionally, regardless of what they've done or said, then those criteria aren't applied. Number 4 we've done already. That was from a previous exam that we looked at. Number 5, the professional employee and the employer have responsibilities for professional development for the employee. Which one of the following would not be a professional, would not be responsibility of the employee? And how do you know the answer is D? Right. Exactly. Volunteer activities, by their very definition, should not be compensated. Otherwise, they wouldn't be volunteer. Moonlighting. How many of you know what moonlighting means? It sounds to me like a word that many of you may not be familiar with. So moonlighting is what you young people call a side hustle these days. Um, doing something outside of your normal, regular, full-time job. Right. So moonlighting or a side hustle generally has a negative connotation with respect to one's full-time employer. Which one of the following might be acceptable? And why is C the correct answer to number 6? Consent. Right. Your employer agrees, then it's okay. Number 7 we've done. That was on a previous version of the exam. Number 8, certified technicians and technologists are bound by the Code of Ethics to maintain their competence and engage only in activities in which they are competent. Which one of the following would be the least desirable method of maintaining competence? Yes, the correct answer to number 8 is A. Working long hours and doing a good job isn't necessarily the best way to stay current in your field. The other 3 choices seem to be a lot better. Number 9 we've done. That was also on a previous version. Number 10, a technology professional who becomes aware. Will OSET check you have done about what? Wei Hong. Yeah, nowadays new OSET members, as of a number of years ago, are required um, to do professional development and report to OSET every couple of years what professional development activities they've engaged in. So it's not mandatory. So I don't know if they'll check, but you have to report it. It's more of an honor system. I don't think there's a lot of checking unless they have reason to believe that you're lying. Number 10, a technology professional who becomes aware of an unacceptable hazard to the public or the environment shall do what? Seems familiar as well. Right, notify the appropriate regulatory authorities, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we come to the end of that one. Let's see what else we got here. Let me see here. All right, so as you know, we do cases as part of our curriculum, as part of our course, and as part of your assignments. And you also know that the exam is all multiple choice. Well, how do they do cases, multiple choice exam? Well, this is how they do it. So we have a case study. It says Road Inc., road construction firm which obtained a contract from the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. The ministry provided the firm with contract documents, which are drawings and specs, prepared by ABC Inc., a firm of engineering consultants. The contract documents stated that the specifications and drawing were for general information purposes and were not guaranteed for accuracy in any way. Road Inc. lost considerable money on the project due to errors in those documents, and then sued both A, B, and C and the individual engineers who sealed the documents for damages. Question 1. Why might Road Inc. have a better chance of receiving damages under tort law than under contract law? And the answer is C, because there's no contract between Road Inc. and ABC Inc. So you have to sue in tort, you can't sue in contract. Number 2, under what tort action do you think Road Inc. would have the best chance at recovering damages? Right, B, negligent misrepresentation of those 3 is obviously the one that's applicable. Number 3, why might the exclusion clause in ABC's documents not apply in this case? And Stephen says a professional standard of care may exist. Does anyone agree? And A is the correct answer. So Stephen is right. Number 3A, the professional standard of care may exist, may override the exclusion clause. Number 4, why might the case against the individual engineers be less likely to succeed than the case against ABC Inc.? And as Stephen says, the answer here is B. Number 5, what is one thing that must be true for Road Inc.'s case for damages to succeed? Right, the correct answer, number 5, is A as well. Okay, one more. I think this is the last one for today. Okay, Julie is an engineering technologist for Canadian Woods, a furniture manufacturer near Lake Louise, Alberta. She has just been promoted, and included in her new responsibilities is the monitoring of water discharges and the preparation of reports for Alberta's Department of Natural Resources. Julie has just prepared a report stating that the level of pollution in the plant's water discharges slightly exceeds the legal limits. Julie knows that her boss, Rob, will not be pleased with the report and is concerned that she might be sent back to her old position. She submits the report in its original form to Rob, who asked her to adjust the data so that the plant remains in compliance. He tells Julie that there's little reason to believe the excess chemicals will harm other people who use the lake for recreational purposes or the lake's ecosystem. In addition, he argues the firm may be forced to shut down or move by the Alberta government if there's bad publicity, as the plant is close to a large tourist area. How should Julie respond to Rob's request? And the first question is, what is one ethical issue that is central to this case? That's right, B. Number 2, what is another ethical issue that is central to this case? Stephen Chu is correct. The other ethical issue central to this case is C, confidentiality of company information. Then they go and say, assume you generated the following alternatives to deal with the ethical issues in this case. 1 is Julie agrees to adjust the data. 2 is Julie refuses to adjust the data and hands the report to Rob and tells Rob he has to make any adjustments himself. 3, Julie refuses to adjust the data and asks for a meeting with Rob to discuss the issue further. And 4, Julie goes directly to the Department of Natural Resources and whistleblows on Rob and her company. Question 3, what is the appropriate analysis for alternative 2? And the right answer to number 3 is B. Although she hasn't done the falsifying, she's still not in the clear with respect to her responsibilities under the Code of Ethics. Number 4, what is the appropriate analysis of alternative number 4? Stephen's just pumping them out there. And that is correct. The appropriate analysis for alternative 4 is A. There's a 5th question. Which of the following statements is the best decision in rationalization? 1, 2, or 3? Let's go back quickly and look at 1, 2, or 3. And let's go forward. So which is the best alternative? Right, C is the correct answer to number 5. Ethics case number 2. Evan, an engineering technologist who is employed by Smart Solutions, Inc., Canadian firm which provides geotechnical engineering and material testing services to independent businesses. One of Smart Solutions' clients is a wealthy entrepreneur, Tom Buckets, who has hired Smart Solutions to design quality programs for his company in Alberta. Tom is very impressed by Evan's design work and has offered him a side consulting project for his new Texas subsidiary. Tom has offered to fly Evan down to Texas for the weekend on his private jet and pay all his expenses. Sounds pretty good to me. Tom explains to Evan that he just wants a general opinion about what needs to be done to improve the Texas operations and will pay him $200 an hour for his time. He thinks it will only take Evan 1 or 2 days to assess the situation with a U.S. subsidiary. Evan does not have to take time off work from his existing job, as he can leave on Friday evening, be back to work on Monday morning without anyone knowing where he has been. What do you think Evan should do? Question number 1, what is one ethical issue that is central to this case? Right, the answer is B, acting with integrity towards your employer. Number 2, what is another ethical issue central to this case? Steven says C, Wei Hong says B. And the correct answer is correct answer here is A, conflict of interest, because you're potentially taking away work from your employer, benefiting yourself. So assume you generated the following alternatives to deal with the ethical issues in this case. 1 is Evan accepts Tom's offer and says nothing to his employer. 2, Evan accepts Tom's offer and gives details of his trip to his employer when he returns on Monday. 3, Evan asks for a meeting with his manager to get permission for the trip. Or 4, Evan refuses Tom's offer. What is the best analysis of alternative number 1? Right. The correct answer to 3 is A. Number 4, what is the appropriate analysis of number 2? Accepting the offer and then telling everybody about it on Monday morning. Right. C is the correct answer, number 4. And of the following statements, which is the best decision and rationalization? 2, 3, or 4. So let's go back quickly and look at 2, 3, and 4. Let's go forward again. Which is the best solution? And the answer to number 5 is B. Correct. All right, so that's how they do it. Obviously, these are pretty easy. The actual exam ones are harder. First of all, you usually have a D or an E, and they're a little more challenging, but that's how it's done. So if you want to know how you do cases in multiple choice, now you know. All right. And lastly on my agenda for today is to go over the third assignment you did not that long ago. And it's a short one. And it says, Bruce is looking to raise capital for his unique, incorporated, high-tech auto manufacturing business. Bruce has a friend, Robin, who's ready to invest in his business. Bruce isn't sure if he should sell shares in his corporation to Robin or borrow money from Robin in the form of a loan. What are the factors that Bruce should think about when making his decision and why? So, I did the Superman theme previous question. I tried to do the Batman one, this one, or Bruce is Bruce Wayne. I kind of forgot that Robin isn't the real name of the person. I think it's Dick Grayson, and the high-tech auto is the Batmobile. But anyway, I screwed that up a little bit. So what factors do you think about when you're getting investors or you're trying to raise capital, when you're trying to decide between selling shares or borrowing money? Well, there's a whole bunch. And the first one that most people, almost everyone, kind of thought of is the control issue. Even if you sell a minority of the shares and you have the majority, there is still some control that you've lost, right? You've got to disclose things to other shareholders. They have certain rights. And even if you're the majority shareholder, you don't have as complete control over the company as you did before you had minority shareholders. So the first thing you think about, control of the decision making. And that's 2 marks out of 10. The second issue that should be thought about is sharing in the profits of the business. So once you have shareholders, you have co-owners. They're owners of the business. And they're entitled to a split of the profits. They're entitled to some dividends if there is profits. So you have to ask yourself, if the business becomes extremely valuable, if it's very successful, do you want to split profits with these investors, or would it be better just to pay them off with interest and keep all the profits to yourself? So that's the second issue that you need to think about, and that's another 2 marks, so we're now up to 4. The third is risk. When you borrow money, you have to pay it back with interest, even if you're not profitable or you're not very profitable. So borrowing money is riskier in that sense, whereas if you get shareholder investors, if you don't make profits, you don't have to pay them anything. No profits, no dividends, no problem. So that's issue 3, another 2 marks, now up to 6. The fourth potential issue is whether you're looking for long-term or short-term investment. Shares are generally long-term investments. Do you want the capital to be raised for the long term or for a shorter term? If it's the shorter term that you're after, you might be better off with a loan, which are generally about 5 years in length, if not shorter. So you can pay off the loan in a shorter period of time and be done with it. So short term versus long term is another issue, and that's another 2 marks. Now we're up to 8. There's a few others. The cost of capital, the interest rate, obviously is very important. The higher the interest rate, the less likely you are to borrow and the more likely you are to go the shareholder route. So that's another possible answer. The tax consequences. Interest on loans can be deducted from profits. So it is often said to be more tax efficient because you can make your taxable income lower while raising the same amount of money. So that's also an issue. Capital structure, which is a cash flow issue, is another potential issue you can think about. And some people said that, well, maybe Robin brings some expertise to the business. If there is expertise and there is input that Bruce is looking for, then maybe it's better to have him as a shareholder because their interests are now kind of vested and they are congruent, right? They have the same interest to make the company more profitable, to make it more successful, whereas if Robin's just a lender, that isn't necessarily something that he's particularly interested in. So all those things are potential answers. If you got 5 of them, you got 10 out of 10. And some people did get 5. So that's how the question was marked. What was not an answer is the strain on the friendship, right? That may be true. Going to business with friends may be a bad idea. Borrowing money from friends may be a bad idea. But it's really not an issue here. Okay, that's a personal lifestyle issue. It's not a legal or business issue. Questions? Stephen, I don't remember everybody's test, right? I have a lot of them. So if you have specific questions about yours, send me an email and I will be happy to. Right. So some people, conflated sole proprietorship and partnership and share and corporation. That's why I said specifically it's an incorporated business. And some people went off on this tangent about sole proprietorship as opposed to partnership. It's totally wrong. Any other question? Nothing else? Yeah, so you don't have to be a member of OSA to write the exam. I know there's some stuff on their website that still says that. You used to have to be a member. You no longer have to be a member. And I don't know why they have updated their website. It may be because if you're not in the college stream, if you're in industry and you're writing the exam, you do have to be an associate member to write the exam. But if you're a college student, you don't. Yeah, if you pass and you're not a member, you still get that as a check mark. Chapter 2 will probably be a recording. What else, folks? What's on your mind? The rest of the classes are exam review. We're also going to take up the test. You still got a test to write and an assignment. So we've basically, with the recording, the pre-recorded chapter 2 lecture, we've covered all the material. And next week's basically test and assignment, the last one. Then we have more review, and then you guys are off to the races to write your exam. Yeah, it's a good time to do it. Yes, I believe I answered that. Waihong asked if the class was pre-recorded. Yes, the next class will be pre-recorded, more than likely. All right, so that's all Stephen's got. Anybody else have any other questions? All right, looks like that's it. Okay, have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll talk to all of you soon. Take care.